I'm in my 10th year as the Fond du Lac County District Attorney, and I also serve as the president of the Wisconsin District Attorneys Association, a bipartisan group of prosecutors across Wisconsin. My dad spent over 30 years as a police officer, and public service runs in our family. You name it, I have personally prosecuted it: cold case homicide, sexual assault, domestic violence, racketeering, complex drug conspiracies, and I'm proud to be law enforcement's choice with 83% of our Wisconsin sheriffs that have endorsed me, and it's bipartisan. Republican and Democrat sheriffs from across Wisconsin, where I have nearly as many Democrat law enforcement endorsements as my opponent has total. And law enforcement has seen the public safety failures over the last 4 years from our Attorney General, who has left special agent positions unfilled, criminal litigation prosecutors unfilled, and he's failed at his #1 campaign promise of fixing our crime labs, taking over twice as long as former Attorney General Brad Schimmel to process DNA evidence. And that's why we need a prosecutor and not a politician leading our Department of Justice. That's the difference. I'm a prosecutor, not a politician. I haven't sought those endorsements. I've sought the endorsements from law enforcement across Wisconsin, and they have lined up behind me in droves, including the Wisconsin Troopers Association, the Wisconsin Fraternal Order of Police, and police agencies and district attorneys and sheriffs across Wisconsin. That's why we need somebody that law enforcement trusts, that can work with our legislature, not waiting until an election year to put forward a budget. And we've seen our Attorney General leave these DCI positions unfilled, and they have not answered the question. We've asked that their organizational charts be released. The Attorney General has refused to do it. He's left nearly 30% of the criminal litigation prosecutors unfilled, according to a Wisconsin State Journal article earlier this year. We need someone that's going to be serious about public safety, not give it lip service.
What is the #1 thing that the DOJ could do over the next 4 years to assist local law enforcement?
Well, the #1 thing the DOJ can do is make sure the special agent, DCI, Division of Criminal Investigation positions are filled, and he didn't answer the question. He said 90. They have well over 90 positions at the Division of Criminal Investigation. The Attorney General knows it. He won't release the data. He's left prosecutor positions unfilled. We saw a consequence of that in Oconto County, where the DA was on leave, and the Brown County District Attorney's Office had to take over prosecution in that county because the Attorney General's office didn't have the resources to spare. We have prosecutor shortages across Wisconsin. We rely on our Department of Justice. We rely on the crime lab. He broke his #1 campaign promise and said he was going to fix the crime labs, and he's taking over twice as long to process less DNA. He's failed at his #1 promise. We need an Attorney General that is going to prioritize public safety, working with law enforcement, and law enforcement across Wisconsin trust me to do that here in Wisconsin. You know, I put out a plan last year in October, early November, that we need to give our Attorney General's office original prosecution authority over Milwaukee County. I've sat across from enough parents that have had to bury their child, including those in Milwaukee, who have no idea who's murdered their children. We need an Attorney General that's going to be serious. People don't feel safe in their homes. They don't feel safe in their vehicles. They won't let their kids go to parks because they're afraid of stray bullets. And he's cut resources, making it more difficult for law enforcement and prosecutors across Wisconsin. We need someone that's going to actually take action, not give it lip service. But when we talk about Waukesha and the Parade Massacre and D.A. Chisholm, Chapter 17, I think 1711, allows the governor to suspend a district attorney or sheriff if they refuse or neglect to perform their duties and they have due process. We saw a DA that was appointed by Governor Evers in Waushara County not show up to work. That is a circumstance where the governor should have suspended the district attorney, had an investigation, because the people of Waushara County deserve to have a district attorney that would prosecute crime in their community. The massacre at the Waukesha Parade was horrific, and so many families were impacted, the physical and emotional damage. The great prosecutors and first responders that fought for justice in that trial, they did such a tremendous job, and I'm proud to do that as a district attorney, working hand in hand with our law enforcement to keep our community safe. Well, I think the premise of your question is incorrect, because right now the crime labs have more or equal resources that Brad Schimmel had when he was our Attorney General. And to give you an example, in DNA alone, the Attorney General is testing a couple thousand less items than Brad Schimmel, And Brad Schimmel did it in about 50 days for the average turnaround time. It's taking our Attorney General 115 days to test thousands of less items. And so we have the tools and resources there to improve the efficiency. We need an Attorney General that's actually willing to work with the great analysts and employees at our crime labs to make sure that we are making it as efficient as possible. And they're even limiting what law enforcement and prosecutors can send. And I hear stories, and I've seen this myself, where we'll ask for something to be tested and they'll tell us no and ask us to explain why we need it tested. And then they'll say, no, we don't think you need that to prove your case. We shouldn't have analysts micromanaging district attorneys that have to prove these cases beyond a reasonable doubt. And despite throttling the number of items, they're still taking longer to do it, and we need someone that is going to fix our crime labs. He campaigned on the opioid epidemic 4 years ago, attacking Brad Schimmel. Almost, I think, over 40% increase in opioid deaths here in Wisconsin. And he made all of these attacks 4 years ago. He's failed to address the opioid epidemic. He's failed to address our crime labs. You know, I've used about every resource our Department of Justice has to offer as a district attorney, know how to work with our law enforcement to best deploy those resources. That's why law enforcement, bipartisan law enforcement, has lined up behind me because they trust me to lead our Department of Justice.
Does the backlog exist? How do you know so? And what would you do to address the problem?
It's a simple yes or no answer. And yes, the backlog exists. How do I know it? From DCI, DOJ, employees, current and former, that have talked with me as a district attorney, president of our Wisconsin District Attorneys Association. Now, there's a difference between review and investigate. When he says review, what he's referring to is the initial triage to see, is this a case where a child could be about to be sexually assaulted, maybe trafficked, child enticement? But then there's a whole host of child pornography downloading, manufacturing, distributing. These cases are not investigated. They need to do subpoenas. They need to be assigned to law enforcement. That has not happened. We did an open records request 2 weeks ago, and they won't even give us the information on when those referrals were assigned. They said, we don't need to give you that information. They only gave us the referrals received, not when it was assigned. He refuses to answer the question. It's a yes or a no. Are you behind more than 1,000 referrals that have not been assigned for investigation? Because families deserve to have an answer to this issue. Liars figure and figures lie. And that's exactly what he's doing, putting out information about special agent positions. He doesn't talk about the special agent in charge positions, about 13 or 14 of those, the 4 director positions, the administrator and deputy administrator positions, the vacancies. Every single one of those administrator and director positions have left since he started to bring in new people because of his failed leadership at the Division of Criminal Investigation, where law enforcement is desperate for a top cop that they can trust to make public safety the #1 priority here in Wisconsin, and he refuses to answer the question 88 out of 113. It's interesting watching someone tie themselves up like a pretzel where he had to defend that but doesn't have to defend the rule of law because he disagrees with it. The rule of law is what separates America from the world. We enforce the rule of law, not just when we agree. That's what my track record is as a district attorney. If you paid attention to the Republican primary, I was attacked for enforcing the rule of law, and I did not back down, even if I disagreed. I have sat across from survivors of sexual assault, and I know that pain doesn't go away after 3 months, 12 months, 2 years, 5 years. We need to make sure they have the resources that they are supported. We need an attorney general that's not going to pick and choose when to enforce the rule of law, even if they disagree, because that's what we expect in the courtroom. Equal justice under the law for all, not just when you agree. He's depleted resources from DCI and prosecutors. So if we want to talk about resources, he has failed us, leaving key positions unfilled during historic violence and a drug epidemic. What you just heard is the Attorney General calling a district attorney a radical because we would enforce the rule of law. He disagrees with the law, so that makes you a radical. You know, the Republican Party was founded on ending slavery in America, and they were called radical Republicans then. Equal justice under the law for all, not picking and choosing. When I do a jury trial, a criminal trial, I don't think you've done one here in Wisconsin, but I ask the jurors, will you enforce the law? They say yes. Would any of you not enforce the law if you disagreed? None of them raised their hand. We need an attorney general that will enforce the rule of law. I also trust our prosecutors across Wisconsin to use their discretion and handle things on a case-by-case basis, because we have amazing prosecutors across Wisconsin, and that's what we do in every single case type, a case-by-case basis with discretion. And we have an attorney general that wants, again, to pick and choose. I've never had a juror raise their hand and say, well, I don't like the law, so I'm not going to follow the instructions from the judge. But that's effectively what our Attorney General is doing, is saying he doesn't like the law, so he's not going to enforce it. I wish he would spend that much time focused on our crime labs and fixing the failing crime labs, the DNA tests that prosecutors and law enforcement rely on across Wisconsin. That's what we need, an Attorney General that's going to focus on public safety, not just talk about it. Again, that's why I have bipartisan support, Republicans and Democrats across Wisconsin, that know we need a prosecutor and not a politician leading our department. But I am prosecuting people for election fraud. We've already convicted 2 people from the November 2020 election, both of those convictions from a Tony Evers appointed judge. And the Attorney General has attacked me for one of those convictions where somebody came to Fond du Lac County that didn't even live in Fond du Lac County and voted. And we get that guidance from the very election manual that the Attorney General's office sends out year after year. And we talk about resources in the prior question. If he were serious about those resources, those special agents, the agents, the law enforcement positions wouldn't have been left vacant. The prosecutor positions would not have been left vacant. The crime lab wouldn't be in the situation it is. Law enforcement wouldn't be lined up behind me because of your public safety failures. We're tired. We want an Attorney General that is going to prioritize public safety, not give it lip service as families want to feel safe in their homes. You brought up the 2016 recount where you were representing Hillary Clinton for that recount, arguing in court that we could not trust machines, that humans could better tell the intent of voters. That's what you argued in court. Candor to the court. That's not how you sound now. You also argued for a special counsel to investigate that election, which I think gave us all greater confidence. You did. You campaigned on it and demanded that Brad Schimmel advocate for special counsel. We have the tweet. We can send it to you if you'd like. We need an Attorney General that's going to be serious and not a plastic bag blowing in the wind, whatever direction their liberal politics. Look at the Parole Commission. You've refused to speak out against Tony Evers and the commissioner releasing nearly 300 murderers and child rapists. Not every family gets justice. There are families in Milwaukee waiting for justice, and these folks have had justice stolen from them, and you won't speak out for them and the voiceless that are no longer with us. And I will do that as Attorney General, like I have done as the District Attorney of Fond du Lac County, because I've lost track of how many families I've had to sit across from that have lost a loved one. And there's no sentence that can bring them back, but it's some small measure of justice. He talks nothing about his office prosecuting one of those Darrell Brooks cases before that horrific massacre at the Waukesha Christmas Parade. I'm not interested in attacking frontline prosecutors. I'm interested in making sure we fight for public safety. That's why law enforcement is lined up behind me. Every single police chief in Fond du Lac County, my sheriff, 60 of our sheriffs across Wisconsin, over 100 police chiefs, sheriffs, and district attorneys that recognize we need a tough-on-crime prosecutor, and that's what my record is as the district attorney of Fond du Lac County. I don't think he managed a lemonade stand before he was elected Attorney General. I don't think you've ever prosecuted a domestic violence case to know that we are not driven by numbers. We're driven by the safety of the victim to make sure we get an outcome that protects them. When I took office, we were not in compliance with the state statute to prosecute those cases within 2 weeks. We put ourselves in compliance and directed one full attorney onto those positions. So don't lecture me about public safety in Wisconsin, because I've been in the trenches with our cops, with our prosecutors, and that's why they've lined up behind me, because of your public safety failures.
Thank you, Mr. Tone.
What we need to do is enforce the laws that we have on the books. You talk about someone that's a danger to themselves or others with a major mental illness that's treatable. Chapter 51 mental health commitment. The law is on the books where somebody can get in front of a judge within 72 hours, a jury trial within 2 weeks, and have their firearm rights taken from them. We need to enforce the law we have on the books. There's a slow-moving mass shooting going on through Milwaukee right now. Over 20 children murdered this year, a 12-year-old within the last week or so, a 5-year-old up in Green Bay. We have violent felons that do not care what the law is. I've prosecuted enough of them as a district attorney that have shot someone or shot at someone else, and they don't care what the law is. We need to make sure we are putting mandatory minimums on people that are using guns to commit violent crimes, to make sure they know there are severe consequences here in Wisconsin to protect our communities, because we will not continue on this track record. I refuse to accept the violence that we're seeing in Milwaukee as the new normal. That's why I announced my campaign last year in Milwaukee, enforcing the rule of law, not just when I agree, not just when it's popular. So what I've said is I will evaluate each case to make sure that we're following the law, and we will protect and defend our environment here in Wisconsin, just like I've done as the district attorney of Fond du Lac County. That's why I have broad support across Wisconsin. I visited all 72 counties during this campaign. Last week, Thursday, 721 miles, 11 hours and 36 minutes to hit my final 4 counties. I've seen all of Wisconsin. I've met with voters, and I will defend our environment as our attorney general. I've done one of those Len Bias homicide trials during this campaign. I've actually done 3 murder trials, including being in one over the primary election. I have fought in the trenches to lock up dangerous criminals that peddle poison, that kill kids in our streets. I started an opioid coalition in Fond du Lac County, a 4-pillar approach that we merged with our drug-free communities. I helped bring a drug court to Fond du Lac County. We expanded our diversion program to do more drug testing. Under former Attorney General Brad Schimmel and Governor Walker, there was a statewide opioid task force. If you go on that website right now, it still lists former Lieutenant Governor Rebecca Clayfish and Attorney General Brad Schimmel. That needs to be restarted, bringing community partners and law enforcement and agencies across Wisconsin together. It hasn't happened on his watch, and he tries to take credit for this lawsuit against the opioid manufacturers. In a Wisconsin State Journal story, there were a number of county executives that said the Attorney General didn't swoop in until the 11th hour when it looked like there was going to be a settlement. So our county executives certainly don't feel like they've had that support. Made progress here in Wisconsin, where we have to make sure every ballot is treated and counted the same in Wisconsin, regardless of where the votes are cast, because elections are the cornerstone of our democracy and our republic. And I will defend the integrity of our elections. I've done it as a district attorney. I will do it as our attorney general, because if we don't have confidence in our elections, it erodes our democracy and our republic, and I will defend it. Public safety is on the ballot. Anybody that's watching this debate can go to my website, and you'll probably see a sheriff, a district attorney, or a police association that is lined up behind me overwhelmingly to make sure that we have an attorney general that will make public safety the #1 priority. That's what my record has been as a district attorney, the president of the bipartisan Wisconsin District Attorneys Association, Republican, Democrat, sheriffs, and DAs across Wisconsin that want someone they trust to help keep our communities safe. That's what I will do as our Attorney General. I will never allow the DCI agent positions, the prosecutor positions, to go to disrepair, where we've seen a consequence with those sex predator cases that our Attorney General has failed to have assigned out, with a backlog of over 1,000 that he refuses to answer. The crime labs taking longer in many categories on his watch, when that was his #1 campaign promise. Anybody knows when you fail at the #1 thing you say you'll do at work, you're going to get fired, and I'd be honored to have your vote on November 8th.